Order. Question number 2, Julianne Genter.
E te mangai o te whare, tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou e te whare. Ko taku pātai ki te minita mō ngā waka, a ka uiwi. Mā te whakapau e iwa tekau mā rua ōrau, o te katoa o te pūtea tahua waka, i te mea, kua kitea ko te waka rori, tētahi kaipana matua, whakapiki tukunga waro, me ano i te tō kotahi mano i waro iwa tekau, ka taea e tērā te whakaheke i te whakakinotanga o te āhua rangi.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Transport, until new roads and improvements to existing roads are completed, it's difficult to assess how much climate pollution may be reduced by better vehicle performance on better roads.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
Can she confirm that reducing climate-damaging pollution is not even an objective of the 30-year Auckland Transport Strategy, the Auckland Transport Alignment Project led by her government?
Mr Speaker,
Honourable Paula
on
Bennett.
behalf of the Minister of Transport, until actually they've decided which projects they're going to go ahead with, they haven't done the climate change and the greenhouse gas emissions analysis. But there is an environmental analysis that is done once those projects are chosen.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
Wouldn't it make more sense to do the greenhouse gas emissions analysis before choosing the project so we could actually have an integrated transport system that decreases pollution?
Well, Mr Speaker,
Honourable Paula Bennett.
Well, Mr Speaker, actually we do need roads in this country, and even something for electric vehicles to be able to drive on. So while we do have a focus certainly on reducing fossil fuels, and it's a key focus, what we are looking at is the environmental impacts once we've decided which projects we will go ahead with.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
Why does she think that these isolated environmental assessments of transport projects will work when that's been what has been happening for the last few decades, and emissions from transport have continued to grow for the last few decades? In fact, a key driver of all of our climate pollution over the last 3 decades.
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Mr Speaker, this is a government that has invested more in public transport and rail than any others in a very long time. So we have a commitment. So what the member's question proposes is that we are choosing between the two. I think that we can have both. That is why we look at the environmental impacts. We do support public transport. We certainly support cycleways, all of which are part of reducing emissions. But we need roads in this country too, and we proudly stand by that.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
Is she denying that 92% of vote transport is on roads, and does that seem like a balanced approach that will enable more New Zealanders to take public transport?
Well, no, Mr Speaker, I'm not. But that's because it's 92% of a much bigger budget, so a lot more money is being spent on both public transport and on roads and on rail.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
Okay. How will it make it easier for ordinary New Zealanders to get to work, get to school, get where they need to go on public transport when your government is spending 4 times as much on expanding a few highways?
The Honourable Paula Bennett.
Well, Mr Speaker, we need roads for some of that public transport to actually travel on. And I accept that the member doesn't support new roads or improving existing roads in New Zealand, but this side of the House does. So we believe that we are investing, and we know we're investing far more in public transport, but we equally stand by our actual commitment to roading projects in this country.
Supplementary?
Supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
So is she happy that her legacy for young Aucklanders will be a city without decent public transport, where they can't afford to buy a house, and in a world where they will be the first to feel the effects of damaging climate change, something her government is actually doing nothing about?
Order. Point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, you may like to consider how that question was addressed. The question on the sheet is the Minister of Transport. As far as I know, the Minister of Transport should not be addressed as she. nor should any of those other matters be addressed to the Minister of Transport.
Yes, I think the question had quite a lot in there that I could have ruled out of order, particularly a reference to housing costs, etc., which has got nothing to do with transport. But in the spirit, order, in the spirit of it being the last day before a substantial recess, I was very generously allowing the question to stand, and now hope the Minister will address it.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Transport, I will stand proudly for those young Aucklanders and their future, because what we are giving them is a range of options for them to get around this country, including the support for the City Rail link, including the support that we have given in actually electrifying trains out to West Auckland, where his great colleague, the Minister of Climate Change Issues, lives. Actually, the investment that we're giving in roads so that those buses can actually travel and get round this country. And does the member not ever ride her bike on a road?
Point of order.
Point of order. Order. I'm going to acknowledge a point of order, Julianne Genter.
I seek leave to table forecasts that show pollution from transport increasing over the next 15 years under this government's policies.
I just need to know the source of the documents.
The source of the document is the Parliamentary Library, and they've assembled this from documents that have been produced by the government ministries.
Order. I'm not going to put the leave, and I refer the member to 1651. The document must be tabled as an authentic source. It must be acceptable to the House to table. It's not acceptable to use it to table members' own views or documents that are attempting to substantiate those views, and in my opinion, those charts are doing that.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Is this another matter that's being raised? Not
I'd
any
like
attempt.
to raise a question with you about your ruling.
No, I've made a ruling that's not debatable in the House.
Sorry, to clarify your ruling, could I ask a question to clarify your ruling?
On this occasion, because of the generosity that I expressed earlier, I will hear from the member.
Do I understand, based on your ruling, that you do not consider the Parliamentary Library a objective source of information?
Order. I know that I've got an agnostic view on that, but I know some members certainly have a very strong view about that as to the authenticity of Parliamentary Library. But no, the reason I said I wouldn't put the leave is I think the member is using it basically to reinforce the points she has made from a political perspective and the question she's raised. The purpose of tabling documents is to further inform members. And if members are as interested in the topic as the member clearly is, they can certainly go to the library and get very similar information prepared. Question number 3.